Marriage is one of the most important and profound institutions that we have in our society. You come together today declaring your love for each other, declaring your commitment for each other. By the power vested in me by the state of California, I now pronounce you husband and husband. You may kiss.
How do cultures change? How do they stop being one thing and become another? Things that had been tradition and custom are replaced by an entirely new reality. More importantly, who decides what those changes should be? What happens when there's a conflict between the will of the people and the will of a few? On May 15, 2008, the California Supreme Court legalized homosexual marriage in a decision that has grave implications for the future of traditional marriage.
The California Supreme Court, in a 4-3 decision, ruled that in California, homosexuals have to have the same opportunity to marry as heterosexuals. This is an outrageous violation of not only the will of the people, but it's also a clear breach of public trust with regards to their duties and powers as members of the state Supreme Court.
The California media had given a lot of attention to the heated battle over same-sex marriage, raging since before 2000, giving a platform to those both for and against homosexual unions.
You know, this is a really good time to let loose because we can get married. We can do it!
There's nothing wrong with the lower court decision that said marriage is for a man and a woman. The high court is obviously scheming to overturn the vote of the people and to destroy the definition of marriage.
While most of the state began issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples on June 17th, a few municipalities and counties, like Yolo County, just north of Sacramento, began the process at 5 p.m. the night before. The Supreme Court ruling, however, was about more than just who loves whom. It was about the power to change the culture. And in Yolo County, and the next day at the Sacramento County Courthouse, amidst the celebrations of the moment, there were also the sights and sounds of the culture war raging in America over the issue of homosexuality.
We have overcome!
The question of who should have the power to alter cultural norms and long-standing traditions was at the forefront following the Supreme Court's ruling in California. As the media followed the controversy, many people began asking whether or not the people's right to rule themselves in a republic had been usurped by yet another activist court.
You know, it was going to go either way by one vote. We were pretty sure that Ron George, the Chief Justice, would be the deciding vote. And it's unfortunate that he imposed his own personal views upon the entire state.
Of course, the High Court's decision did not occur in a vacuum.
The ruling itself was actually an effort by the homosexual community to, in essence, undo the law that was established by 61% of the people of California.
That law was Proposition 22, which Californians passed overwhelmingly in 2000.
The homosexual lobby in California was very active, and it's only intensified over the last 10 years or so. The language of Prop 22 essentially fought back. It was a statute placed into law which said that only marriage between a man and a woman is valid or recognized in California.
Homosexuals and those sympathetic to their demands continually challenged Proposition 22 until a number of cases from gay and lesbian couples finally made it to the California Supreme Court. Activists made sure the media knew what they were looking to the court to do.
We rest a lot of hope in the California Supreme Court that they're going to say equality is equality, fairness is fairness, and love is love.
Many people saw the court's decision differently, including 3 justices on the Supreme Court itself.
The dissenting opinion was a harsh dissenting opinion, pointing out that this court had clearly overstepped their boundaries and engaged in judicial activism and it was a clear breach of public trust.
In fact, the ruling highlighted deep cultural divisions concerning the role of the judiciary in American civil life.
One of the great issues is what's the role of the courts in American society. Our founders came up with a brilliant idea, and it was based upon the fact that they understood the fallen nature of man. So they said there's got to be a balance of powers.
You know, it's interesting, after spending roughly 17 years working in the state legislature, that our courts will continue to decide the law by themselves, without us.
They are taking away the people's right to govern themselves, and that's not the job of the court. The job of the court is to interpret the laws and to see that the laws are faithfully preserved. That's their job, not to make new laws.
Remember, the people of California voted. They establish what is and what is not law in the state of California, not the courts, not four justices.
Now what happens in California, where we live in a democracy where the consent of the governed is expressed, there's a referendum, the people are against this. A court comes along and say the people may be against it, but we're going to decide it's a good thing anyway. They are destroying the balance of powers. The courts in this country have run amok.
But supporters of traditional marriage in California have banded together to combat the activist court.
Since 1998, the Protect Marriage Coalition has been together, and it was in 2005 when the coalition came back together, and a few of us decided that now's the time. Now's the time to move towards a constitutional amendment to take it out of the hands of the courts.
The result was Proposition 8, which will appear on the November ballot in California. Proposition 8 would amend the California Constitution to provide that only a marriage between a man and a woman is valid or recognized in California. Homosexual activists will be spending millions on the fight to keep Proposition 8 from passing. But the very battle itself is a stark reminder of what happens when courts exceed their judicial limits and begin to rule the people in unintended and unwanted ways. If the people should be allowed to define marriage, what should the definition be? On what should it be based?
Every society through the history of civilization has recognized marriage as the institution of a man and a woman. One man, one woman. That's the definition. There have been variations from this, but there is this generally accepted wisdom, which you call natural law. People know it. It's written on their hearts, as Romans 2 says.
But where does this generally accepted wisdom come from? Why has mankind generally, across thousands of years, defined marriage as being between a man and a woman? In a speech at Hillsdale College in 2004, Professor HADLEY ARKES said that the institution of marriage is actually derived from the very obvious realities of nature.
The notion of marriage is anchored in the understanding of sexuality in the strictest sense. The sexuality, as John Paul II says, that is imprinted in our nature, in the inescapable fact of gender, that we are made men and women.
One night when Larry King was pressing Rick Warren on television saying, "Are you really against homosexual marriage?" He said, "Yes." And then he said, "What's the arguments for it?" King did. "Why do you say that?" I thought Rick Warren's answer was perfect. He said, "Stand a naked man and a naked woman next to each other and look at them and you'll see they're made for each other." I mean, that's the natural moral order of things.
In the Judeo-Christian perspective, of course, this was God's design for humanity.
Scripture tells us that God made mankind in His image in the genders of male and female. Female was taken out of Adam and then presented back to Adam. She is the female gender completion of the image of God.
Marriage, then, is the joining, the wedding of the two halves of humanity into a single flesh. The roots of marriage in nature go even deeper, however. Even pagan cultures saw marriage arising from the fact that when a man and woman united sexually, another life was often created.
The notion of marriage is built around the natural correspondence between the coupling of bodies and the bringing forth of that new life that embodies the union of two partners. The very notion of marriage is anchored in what could only be called the natural teleology of the body, in the fact that it requires two people, not